Die LRF Veeskool is nou 'n jaarlikse instelling wat al vir 15 jaar aangaan en wat 'n belangrike inskrywing geraak het oor die tyd op die kalender van die veebedryf hier in Suider-Afrika. Die tema vir jaar is bulseleksie as winsdrywer. En ons moet 'n paar van die rolspelers en sprekers hier gesels om hulle menings te kry. Here at the 2023 Stockman School, LRF Stockman School at Aldam, one of the opening speakers was the Director General of Agriculture, Mr. Mooketsa Ramasodi. I'm talking to him now about the essence of his message. Mr. Ramasodi, I want to start with one of the things that you said quite late on in your presentation, and that is you asked the question, why is the national identification and traceability system not up and going? Please, let's start there. What is the story there?
Thank you very much and for the interview. I think that's one of those issues that we have got to really debate as South Africans. The question that we have is that biosecurity is everybody's responsibility.
Yes.
At the core is what the message that we normally say is that it's a shared responsibility. Now, in any shared responsibility, there are various interests that you would have that would be for or against, or would have an alternative system that you need to put in place. Now, at the center of this is that there are various ways in terms of how the different role players, and in this case, government, industry role players, you name them, from a farmer up to abattoirs, would need to interact to come up with a South African system. And as I was indicating that we have been at this for a very long time, starting off with various systems that we have in our country to now what we have in place, the South African animal identification and traceability system, which is something that we are trying to come up with. And ultimately what we have seen is that we have got bits and pieces of traceability systems that we are running. All that we need to do in South Africa is to make these systems to talk to each other, be interoperable, so that we can be able to have an integrated animal identification and traceability system that would be able to dispense data to all the role players within the value chain up to consumer level.
The foundation of all these things that we're talking about, traceability amongst others, is the fact that we are an exporter. The agricultural sector is an exporter. We need to gear ourselves for the export markets. Now, and then biosecurity obviously is a big thing. And you spoke about the 6 pillars that basically biosecurity should rest on. Can you very briefly expand on that?
I mean, any biosecurity system would need to have very strong legislation.
Yes.
Or in our case, in the Animal Diseases Act, the Meat Safety Act, 2 of those. But you would need, in terms of now coming to the new animal identification and traceability system, have a very strong act that would deal with the issues around any biosecurity threats that you would have to the system. Secondly, you need to have very good regulations. And any regulatory system that does not have good regulations, because an act would only give you at very high level what you need to do, but regulations are very important. Thirdly, you need to have an implementation system, whether you have got an inspection service system, the veterinary system in your country, your meat safety aspects in terms of controls. That inspection unit, the third unit, is very important for you to go ahead. Then you need to have a very strong laboratory services, your diagnostic laboratories that you need to have in place, followed also by a pharmaceutical system that you need to have, whether OBP, ARC, or private sector players, very important. And then lastly, we underestimate in any system the ICT systems that you need to have in place in order to deal with this.
ICT?
Yeah, a communication system that needs to be in place. So that's basically all that you need to have in a very good system, because if all of these 5 talk to each other, you have got a very good biosecurity system, you have got a very good food security system.
But am I right in saying that we are not up there yet? We have specific failures in these pillars?
And granted, and government has been vocal about certain things and lapses that we have had. And I'll use the previous outbreak that we had on FMD as one of those lapses that we are having. That you could have at any given time, and let's leave COVID behind, an animal that moved from Limpopo up to Northwest undetected, and you have got an outbreak happening elsewhere. One would say and start putting blame and have a blame shifting game. But the essence is that the system should be able to detect movement from one area to the other.
Yeah, and the responsibility there is not only on the state. No, every citizen should take responsibility. Shared responsibility.
Shared responsibility.
I would just wanted to touch on the last thing, and that is the lack of vaccines, OBP, the failure of OBP. Where are we with that?
In my inputs, I made 2 contributions, and I would like to maybe settle on those. Firstly, because part and parcel of the South African way of dealing with issues is the industrialization. We realized that the systems that we had at OBP, at the ARC were archaic. And government invested in terms of having GMP facilities both at the OBP and at the ARC. Currently, as we speak, at the ARC, we have got just under 450 million to come up with a system that would allow us to have our vaccines, FMD vaccines. At the OBP, just under 200 million rands that is meant for the GMP facility. Over and above that, we have now issued a tender through the DTIC and also through the IDC to look at systems of how do we massify and industrialize what we are having at the OBP and at the ARC. And through TIA, we are also looking at how do we get the next generation vaccines. Now, coming to the issue around the OBP, the issues that are there cannot be hidden anywhere. We need to admit that there were challenges in terms of vaccine production, and the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development had even gone to the private sector to say, come and assist us to deal with the issue around vaccine availability. And we have seen improvements, but at this rate at which we are going, we need something to do, something very drastic, and there are interventions that government is looking at just to ensure that we don't lose that, because head health in South Africa is what drives profitability. Without that, we won't be able to move very far.
And those are the thoughts of Mr. Mooketsa Ramasodi, the Director General of the Department of Agriculture. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.